In our postmodern world, where technology can take care of things that once required human interaction, loneliness has now become the norm. So how is it that some people can enjoy being alone for prolonged periods of time while others are suffering immensely? Well, it's because when some people are by themselves, they are lonely, but for others, they are alone. The lonely person wakes up at 1:15 p.m. on their day off. In preparation for not having to go into the job they are not looking forward to continuing, they spent the night before staying up until 4 a.m. playing Call of Duty. It helped them to drown out the voices in their head that reminded them of how unfulfilling, painful, and lonely their existence was. For them, sleep was just another form of escapism, instead of a way to help them feel energized the next day. And as they stared out their bedroom window, with the sun perched high in the sky, they became disappointed with a world that had so easily rejected a person like them, and looked outside in disgust. The alone person wakes up at 9 a.m. on their day off. In order to prepare for their day of no work, they already had an agenda they wrote up the night before. They aren't too happy with their current job, and so they want to try and fill their time alone with things that would propel them towards a more fulfilling future. The fact that they knew they would most likely spend this day alone didn't bother them either. Although they weren't yet the person whom they wanted to be, they knew that giving their current state of being something to strive towards was an act of showing themselves that they really loved for and cared about themselves, just like a close friend or partner would do. When the lonely person gets out of bed, they are quickly reminded of their agony. That's because they just grabbed their phone and started looking through everyone's Instagram story. While scrolling through each social event that took place the night before, they couldn't help but feel more connected, but less connected than ever. Social media was a tool for them to have access to the lives of thousands of people's daily routines, and yet they felt as though the distance between these strangers they were viewing would be even less if they didn't have access to what the strangers shared, because that connection was based on a false reality that couldn't lead to a deep, meaningful connection with any of these people. When the alone person gets out of bed, they take some time to nurture their body. After brushing their teeth, they decide to take a quick walk before checking their phone. When on their walk, they look at all the cars going by and people doing their own thing and feel a sense of joy. Although none of these people are sharing their experiences with the alone person, everyone appears to have some mission they'd like to complete for the day, and it makes them motivated to set out for big things themselves. Finally, around 2 p.m., the lonely person gets themselves ready for their day. After a few minutes of them sitting off the side of their bed, lamenting in their strong distaste towards the current state of our individualized humanity, they decide to make something to eat. Nutrition isn't much of a priority to them because they haven't yet figured out how to take care of themselves in a positive way. So it's the usual air-fried, nutritionally inadequate meal of a chicken patty and fries for them. Even though they wake up on their days off at 1 p.m., don't get any sunlight in the morning, scroll through everyone's so-called great lives on Instagram, and eat like crap, they still can't seem to understand why they don't enjoy the time they spend with themselves. After their walk, the alone person decides it's time for their first meal of the day. They want the outer actions they take and the food they put in their body to be a consistent reflection of their inward feelings towards themselves, because the outer actions are what really make it easier for them to convince themselves that they are worthy of love and approval on their own. When they first started adopting some of these positive habits, they weren't fully convinced of their benefits. But over time, when they stayed consistent, they found that their now mostly positive thoughts came easily as a byproduct. They decide to have a well-balanced meal with some healthy fat sources, complex carbohydrates, and a high protein source. And that meal gives them even more energy to accomplish what they're trying to conquer today. After a vicious burp and an upset stomach, the lonely person lays down for another quick scroll. Since they lack self-control, they decide to check to see how their ex-girlfriend is doing, even though they know it will only bring them more misery. When looking through her pictures, they are reminded of who they once were. A happy, more sociable person who found enjoyment in almost every moment. Come to think of it, this seemed like where their downfall all began. When the lonely person decided to base their self-worth on another person's opinion of them, as is common amongst humans who haven't done the proper introspection, and that other person decided they no longer wanted them in their life, the lonely person felt unlovable and unworthy of having a high self-esteem. But the truth was, the lonely person had always been like this, a people-pleasing, please like like me type of human that was constantly basing their worth on other people's opinions of them. And since they had lost their girlfriend and most of their close friends from back then, it was as if there were now only two people with which they spent their time with. The one inside them that was telling them why they were useless and didn't deserve love, and the other one inside of them who decided to agree with that voice without questioning it. So every day was a battle inside of their mind that overtook their outward actions they participated in on a day-to-day basis. And to escape that internal battle, they would fill any free time they potentially had with some form of mind-numbing stimulation. The alone person finished their healthy meal and was ready to start their weekly self-check-in practice. Once they realized that the world was becoming more individualized and that their remote work would have them spending large amounts of time alone, they knew that they had to figure out a way to enjoy the time they spent with themselves. You see, just 6 months prior to this, the alone person was a lot like the lonely person. They too didn't have much of any friends, and they too had just lost their girlfriend after getting dumped. But the trajectory of the alone person's life was vastly different due to how they decided to handle it. When they started to understand the slippery slope of depression they were spiraling into, they took the space to reflect on what was going on in their mind. There were clearly many negative feelings their body was producing due to their loneliness, and it is true that all humans to some extent crave some form of deep human connection. Instead of trying to escape these feelings, they sat alone, doing nothing, and listened to what their body and mind was trying to tell them. They fully accepted that these feelings were simply a natural reaction to a biological craving of wanting to be liked and accepted that came from the more primal parts of their brain that formed in order for us to find a tribe to survive with in caveman times, and that, in many regards, this was outdated programming. In this discovery, they didn't try and repel or get rid of that deep primal need. Instead, they acknowledged it, felt it as deeply as possible, said to themselves, "I hear you," and gave themselves the comfort and consolation they were so desperately looking for in another person in the past. And in doing so, they were able to recognize when that feeling happened in the future and why it happened so they could stop identifying with it completely and allowing that feeling to dictate their entire mood and daily actions. It took a long time of consistently sitting alone and learning how to get more in touch with what was happening with their five senses, but eventually they became a pro at it. Following that development, they dove even deeper into their psyche and asked the tough questions, starting with, why am I lonely in the first place? When answering that question, they found out that they feel lonely because they aren't with anyone and they haven't found anyone that values them. They wanted someone whom they could share secrets with, be vulnerable with, and talk to on a frequent basis. And it felt like most people either didn't have the ability to be vulnerable with them or just didn't care about the same things as them. Upon getting the answer to that question, they followed up with, why do I think I need those things in order to not feel lonely? And after some reflection, they came to the conclusion that those things are what all humans needed in order to live optimally. But that was only a small portion of the picture. All throughout their life, they craved that one friend group that they saw other people have. The ones that would always have your back, that you could experience life with and could count on. But a large part of the reason they wanted that in the first place was because they saw so many other people with those types of friend groups, and they all seemed so much happier than themselves. So it wasn't just this biological need, but also some sort of belief that was created in them that stated that in order for them to really be fulfilled and complete in life, they needed to have a bunch of close friends. And so they asked themselves, where did that belief come from? After some more introspection, they found out it came from this societal pressure to fit in order to be considered cool, and from peers and family members over the years that basically told them, if you don't have a lot of friends, you're a weird loser. And when they realized that, they realized this was a belief that was capable of being changed. So, every week, they would check in with themselves and make sure they were sufficiently giving themselves the love they needed through introspective questions like these ones. They also gave themselves extended periods of time doing nothing but listening, accepting, and observing their thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And they would make sure they had a plan of action each day to stay on the track towards self-mastery. It was now around 6 p.m. for the lonely person, and all they had done so far was escape, escape, escape. Peering out of their apartment window, they thought of something that didn't usually cross their mind, trying to put themselves out there and meet new people for once. But since they lacked the self-respect and positive thinking needed in order to do something uncomfortable that would result in growth, doubts and indecision quickly started to flood their mind. They started to think that the world was cruel and that people were too evil to be trusted anyway, which was really just an excuse to not go outside. Then they started to ask themselves questions based out of fear. Where could they meet people? And even if they did try to meet people, what would they say to them? They'd probably just embarrass themselves. What are the chances that those people would be into the same things as themselves? Would they even get along? And what if they brutally reject and laugh at me? These questions festered in their mind until the paralyzing anxiety that resulted from it quickly made them revert back to the internet while suppressing those emotions of fear, sadness, and loneliness even further. They were at the most dangerous midpoint that anyone could get in their life. The place where their life was not comfortable enough to the point where they actually enjoyed it in the time they spent with themselves, but wasn't uncomfortable and painful enough to actually do something about it. Now that the alone person had eaten well, done their weekly check-in, and did some other work on their passions and interests, they realized they had nothing to do. And for the first time in a while, they actually started to feel kind of lonely. To deal with this, they did what they would usually do, remind themselves that this feeling was a conditioned response due to our more primal brain areas and that they were completely whole on their own, so long as they didn't let society's beliefs about what makes a person valuable be instilled into them. But still, there was a bit of a lingering need for human interaction in them. Sure, they enjoyed their time alone, but it didn't mean they never wanted to interact with humans because of it, and they certainly felt that urge more than usual right now. So now that they were confident in themselves and had done the introspective work necessary in order to go after what they wanted, even if they feared it, they decided to not play the victim and start the pursuit of finding a meaningful friend group. Because they knew that friend group wasn't going to magically come to them. They had to put in the work to create it. They started by trying to think of some good places to meet people. It would probably be better for them to approach a group rather than one person, since a group of 2 or more people is usually already in the mood to speak friendly with someone. Upon realizing this, they thought of a few different places: a bookstore, a concert, some local event, a bar, or the park. There were also events they could find online with people that had similar interests as them using the app called meetup.com, but they decided they just wanted to get right out there today. So they ended up going to the park. Upon arriving at the park, they saw a friendly-looking group of people who all looked to be having a good time. They knew that they would probably start to freeze up and get anxious because they were doing something that had them stepping outside of their comfort zone, and their mind would probably race with insecure thoughts since it had been such a long time since they had done something like this. But thanks to all the introspective work they had done on themselves, they were able to acknowledge those feelings and thoughts without attaching to them and dive head first into their fears. They started to put one foot in front of the other, walk up to them, and said, "Hey guys, I'm a lone person. How's everyone doing?" After an overall positive response, the alone person continued, "So I'm pretty new to this area, and I'm trying to meet some like-minded people. You mind if I sit down with you guys?" And they agreed. They then sparked conversation with each other, talking about where each other came from and what they enjoyed doing until they were finally ready to leave. The alone person exchanged numbers with a few of them and said they would hit them up soon. In that moment, the alone person had become just about everything they had strived to be long ago. A person who was happy and content with their time alone, but still made the effort to be sociable when the time called for it. And if you are someone who wants to get to the point of being alone but not lonely, then you should definitely consider joining my Ultimate Self-Mastery course. The Ultimate Self-Mastery course is a holistic approach to strengthening your self-awareness, accepting your flaws, building better habits, and creating a fulfilling life. This is a 14-video course that I spent over 500 hours compiling, and it is so much more detailed than my YouTube videos, which usually are appealing to the YouTube algorithm. With this course, I was really able to dive deep into each topic that is within this course, and there's 4 sections, which are self-awareness, shadow work, building better habits, and creating your own life philosophy. Each video has at least one worksheet associated with it, so you can directly apply what you learn and actually retain the knowledge that you're going to learn from this course. And a lot of the questions that I have on those worksheets are related to the questions that I was asking within this video that the alone person was asking to themselves. So you're really gonna understand where your triggers and negative thoughts come from, how to transform them, how to create your own life philosophy, and build the right habits to make you actually enjoy yourself and realize the inherent worth that you have. But along with that, really the most impactful thing with this course is the community. When you join the course, you will have access to the exclusive self-mastery community, which is full of like-minded individuals who are also on the path towards self-mastery. We have all been meeting in a video group call every other weekend, and it has been amazing to see the growth of those guys who stuck with the course until the very end and actually did the worksheets. They all saw amazing progress, and reading some of their testimonials and what they've experienced and what they've learned from the course is just so fulfilling to me, and those guys motivate me a lot too. It's just so fun to have that community that is all building each other up and is very inspiring, and we're all trying to do big things. So if you are serious about changing your life for the better and you're just in this enough is enough, it's time to change my life sort of mindset, and you want to join that community and the course, you can click the first link in the description. And I'm also running a sale until the end of January for New Year's because I want the community to grow even more. So you can use the code New Year's, that's just one word, New Year's, at checkout for 10% off the purchase of the course. Thank you very much to all my patrons on Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a platform separate from YouTube where I'm putting out exclusive content. If you want to check that out, link in the description. And if you want more personal development videos similar to this one, check out my whole playlist on all my personal development videos. You might like them a lot, and I'm heading out. Thank you guys. Peace.